Thank you, dear President of the World Human Forum, and thank you, dear President of Demokritos, my friend George Nunesis, for the honor and pleasure to moderate this very special panel, and also for having chosen this topic for today's conference. And also it is rare for an event to start with what promises to be the culmination of the event. But this is exactly what will happen now. And I'm invited, so you are sitting already, so Nunes did my job, my first part of the job. And I can start directly with introducing you, Beeban. Beeban Baroness Kidron is a leading voice on children's rights in the digital environment and a global authority on digital regulation and accountability. She has played a central role in establishing standards for online safety and privacy across the world. Baroness Kidron sits as a crossbench peer in the UK's House of Lords. She's an advisor to the Institute for Ethics in AI, University in Oxford, is commissioner on the UN Broadband Commission for Sustainable Development, an expert advisor for the UN Secretary General's High-Level Advisory Board on AI, and founder and chair of Five Rights Foundation, and this is where I come into your equation, Beeban. And before being appointed to the Lords, she was an award-winning film director and co-founder of a charity named Film Hub. So, Alexandra, this is connecting politics and arts together here, really in person. Dear Beeban, several years ago, and following a testimony I delivered in front of the Select Committee on AI of the House of the Lords in London, you asked to see me. I flew to London, where within the first minute of our encounter, you told me that we have built, and the we, it is not me and you, it is as humanity, we have built a technology which valorizes the idea that all users are equal. This is the internet. But if you treat all users as equal, you told me, you treat a child as if it is an adult. And a child should be a child until they mature, not only until the moment they pick up their smartphone. I guess you remember my immediate reaction and my promise and unconditional commitment to the noble cause you have been pursuing, with a mix of unbelievable energy, courage, and political astuteness. From that time, it is 8 years ago, we worked together, from my role at IEEE and at yours, with a uniquely capable and passionate team of your Five Rights Foundation. Together, we have been opening the ways for and supporting legislating bodies in East and West, North and South, always unanimously. Legal and regulatory frameworks that are based on your vision for an age-appropriate design for Internet platforms. This is the key word. With your keen socio-political instinct, you also saw what was in the comings. Five Rights, in collaboration with leading experts in AI, child rights, law, and policy, you drafted and made public this year the Children and AI Design Code. The code provides a practical, actionable framework that spans the entire life cycle of an AI system, ensuring children's needs are prioritized by design and by default. It is a pity I don't have it to show to the people, the physical copy of it. This has been, by all accounts, an epic journey, where you have been changing the world to the better. You are an example, really, that gives us, everybody, courage that it can be done. Are any memorable moments in this stunning itinerary that you would like to share with us? And what are your plans? And in which direction would you want to see things moving?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation, Your Excellency. Wonderful to share a stage. And thank you for that very kind, generous introduction to my work. I think that maybe I just start by saying three things that must be said and must be close to our heart. First of all, this is a generational injustice. It is not right that we have said to children that they must be adult from a very young age, that they have to make the discriminations about how to behave, about what content they should consume, about what relationships to have, from really tiny tots through teens, you know, all the way to adulthood. So that is my first point, is it's a generational injustice. My second point, which is perhaps a little less obvious, is that technology is always presented as progressive. But in this case, it's regressive. We decided many, many years ago, in the UK it was 150 years ago, we took the kids out of the chimney, we took them out of the fields, and we put them in the classroom. And that was the beginning of an idea of childhood. And that story has been built on, you know, through decades. And that is a key factor. To push them back into being commercial actors from the tiniest age is simply regressive. Yeah? I'm not saying technology is regressive overall. I'm saying in this way of denying a childhood, it is regressive. And then finally, I want to say, you know, the complication of the narrative is it's too difficult, it's already gone, it's not something we can deal with, is actually profoundly, profoundly wrong. This is a 100% engineered world. This is a world that determines outcomes. In fact, all that A/B testing that goes on is to determine exactly the outcome. And so many of the things that we need for children, actually switching some things off, yeah? And I think that this is my big point here. We have to design the world to be appropriate for children, like we design other environments. You know, we have zebra crossings, we have lights, we have yellow lines, we have arrangements so that we can live together, and we have to have those arrangements online. So in terms of my own journey, I just want to say that when I first had this thought that you just described, that actually a child is a child until they reach maturity, and it must not be that the smartphone interrupts that journey, I thought about a couple of things. The first thing I thought about was that they have an established set of rights. And so my first act was, with colleagues, to actually draft a General Comment 25 on the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, to say rights actually apply to the digital world. And that was a very important thing, because it dragged the digital world into our sort of area of consciousness and governance and political concern. And then when we very unfortunately were in the process of considering Brexit, very unfortunately, we had to bring the GDPR into the UK as a standalone piece of legislation. And I looked at the recital 38 that said children need special consideration. And I decided to manifest that recital in a statutory code. And that turned into the Age-Appropriate Design Code, and that then turned into a piece of legislation which has gone all over the world, some of it with the help of IEEE, and it also then became, you know, a symbol of this idea that you can design the technology for the child, rather than ask the child to manage the technology, you know, like putting a child in their bedroom in direct conflict with the desires of a global company that has spent billions trying to get their attention. And then finally in the UK, you know, we've had I think we've played a very sharp role in all sorts of things. And I don't say that we got everything right. And in fact, I think there are some things in the DSA and the AI Act in Europe that are better than what we've done. But I will say this, if I had been sitting here 5 years ago, with this audience and said, on July the 24th, it will be illegal in the UK to recommend pornography, to recommend self-harm, to recommend an extreme diet, to recommend a child commit suicide. You know, we're going to make that illegal. I think people wouldn't have believed it was possible, and that is what's happening this year. So I think really what I want to finish by saying is, and actually let me mention just one more thing, the work with IEEE, we also said, you know, engineers are problem solvers. You know, we can build this the way we want it to be. And so Five Rights has worked very closely with IEEE, and we started a set of standards that help people see what good looks like in IEEE Standard 2089. So let me just finish with this. It takes everyone. There is no one in this room who's exempt from this discussion. You know, we all bring up children, we all live around children, we all have a responsibility for children. That is a decision that democracies have made, that there is a public responsibility for children. So that's the first thing. And so in the army, we need engineers, we need leaders, we need academics, we need parents, we need teachers, and we need children themselves. And I have spent many, many, many hours with children actually thinking and asking and understanding their experience. And they are very sophisticated consumers, and they want the adult world to act quicker, better, stronger, to give them the experience they want. They are unequivocal on that. And then we also need the kind of leadership that the Greek Prime Minister here, that you are showing, to actually make it a mandate of your government and everybody in your government, because we cannot afford to stop pushing forward, and there are real reasons in the world right now that it could push in the other way, because now we know it's possible. Then we all have to act to make that possibility a reality.
Thank you. Thank you, dear Beeban. And there is no way I can be too generous to you. I say here one tiny fraction of what I can say publicly. This is much more. Mr. Prime Minister, a year ago, exactly, precisely on the day, IEEE celebrated the 15th anniversary of the publication of the Internet Protocol. It was published in our journals. And I had the pleasure on this occasion to contribute with an interview with you, where you spoke about the history and the great achievements of the Internet, including for the great modernization of Greece's public administration. The interview was shown at the conference, and many said it was by far the most thoughtful contribution. Also, because it addressed heads-on to societally disastrous effects caused mainly by the so-called asocial networks in a way that was both a call to and an announcement of action. You mentioned the erosion of the cohesion of the demos, and thus of democracy, was the one, taking us back to the tribal times, 2,500 years ago regression, and the huge, unprecedented experiment we are running with the mental health of our children. You said it verbatim. It was precisely at that moment in the interview when the motto of today's conference, "Give our children back their childhood," emerged. You named the addictive algorithmic design as the root problem and said that robust regulation, including at EU level, toward an age-appropriate design of the major Internet platforms is the necessary path to a solution. On December 30, 24, during the presentation of Greece's national strategy on the matter, exactly in this space here, you repeatedly said at the end of of this 2 hours event that the problem are the business models of certain corporations which got addicted in making a lot of money by making our children, and of course us, addictive to their use on purpose. You said it 2 times. A year has passed since then. And I know that you and your government have been systematically and effectively delivering on this call for action. supported by Greece's national strategies on AI and on the newly formulated strategy for combating children's online addiction, which is considered to be the most advanced in the world. So, what do you think, Mr. Prime Minister, about this one-year journey that saw Greece becoming a thought and action leader in this most critical and strategic domain? And what are your next plans? And what would you like to be able to say in a year from now at the third embodiment of this wonderful conference?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me, and my congratulations to the World Human Forum and to Democritus for making the Lyceum project a yearly meeting point to discuss extremely thought-provoking but also complicated issues that connect technology to humanities, to philosophy, and it was from the beginning our belief within our AI strategy that Greece can play a thought leadership in connecting ancestral intelligence, as Alexandra very rightly coined the term, with artificial intelligence, to understand what we can actually learn from ancient philosophy and wisdom in addressing what is a profound and, in my mind, an unprecedented challenge. And I'm referring to the rise of AI in general. For the first time, we humans no longer have the monopoly on intelligence, and this is a profound change from any previous technological revolution that has taken place. It questions the whole notion of humanity, of consciousness, of agency, and in that sense, it is not just a technological evolution or even a revolution. It is something, in my mind, completely different, qualitatively different. Now, back to the topic that we're discussing. I'm really privileged to share the stage with the Baroness. She's done an amazing job, both in terms of educating the public opinion, but also coming up with real suggestions on how to address a real problem. And what is the real problem? The real problem is exactly that we no longer, in the digital world, treat children as children. We treat them as adults, while recognizing that they are more vulnerable than adults in terms of patterns of behavior which are well established by science itself. And yes, I've made this point numerous times, that we are running an unprecedented experiment, global experiment, with the mental health of our children and our teenagers. And as far as we know, from the scientific evidence that we have, this is not going to turn out well. So we already have enough science to understand that something is going wrong with our children, with their mental health. And when we speak to parents about this, they recognize it immediately. I was pleasantly surprised, but also shocked, by the amount of support we got from parents when we started speaking about this topic, because parents need to be part of the equation. In the sense, we understand something is happening. We don't want our kids to be glued to a screen, but we don't know how to deal with the problem. So there's no doubt that we have a problem, and there's no doubt that the root cause of the problem is related to the fact that the content that is consumed by children and teenagers is designed in such a way to have our kids and our teenagers spend as much time as the tech companies can glued to a specific application, because they make money out of it. It's as simple as that. The models and the algorithms are designed to promote addiction. In the same way, and allow me, I apologize for being slightly provocative here, that tobacco companies knew, many decades ago, that smoking was addictive. They knew it, yet they made it very clear that they wanted to prolong this truth for as long as they could. So I think these are facts that we already know, and as responsible leaders, I feel that we have to do something about it. So what is it that we have done in Greece? The first thing that we've done is to openly speak about the issue, engage with parents, and try to explain to them that already within the given technological world, there are tools that they can use to limit the access that their kids have to their smartphones and to specific applications. The second thing that we did was to try to overcome what the tech companies always tell us is the big problem, that we don't know the real age of the user. So how do we get a proper age verification tool in order to define who is a digital adult and who isn't? This is also an interesting discussion we need to have. Well, we said, okay, we can solve this through an application we call the Kids Wallet. We will simply connect this application to our digital registry, and then it will be easy to verify the exact age of any user. I cannot believe that today we are still hiding behind this very flimsy excuse that we don't know the age of the users when technology has advanced so far. And the Kids Wallet also gives, in a simplified way, more control over the applications themselves from the parents. Again, it is impossible to do this without involving and educating the parents, because it becomes a collective action problem. Which parent is going to tell his kid, I don't want you to spend more time on your phone if everybody else is doing it? So we need to address the problem in its entirety. And then, of course, the next stage is how do we turn this into more thoughtful or advanced European regulation? Because, as a medium-sized country, there's only that much we can do. And how far should we take this discussion? Should we take it as far as a complete ban on social media under a certain age? Is this something which is realistic? Is this, a real possibility? Should we think in terms of? It's interesting that China, which is so advanced in technology, they put their own restrictions on social media, and they're quite draconian. So they understand that they don't want their, their children, engaged. Do we have time restrictions, for example, which are, designed as a, an interim step? You can only spend, X amount of time on any given application per week. I fundamentally believe that raising children is about boundaries, and there are no boundaries now, in the digital world. And it's sort of strange, and going back to the argument made by Jonathan Haidt in his very, I think, important book, The Anxious Generation, that we don't allow our kids to play or to encourage them to be outside. We are scared of unsupervised play. We track our kids. Everywhere they go through our, nice tracking applications, because we want to feel safe, because we think we protect them this way, but we do almost nothing when it comes to the digital world in terms of what content they consume, in terms of violence, in terms of extreme and aggressive pornography, in terms of our girls being exposed to, little girls being exposed to AI models as models of beauty which are completely unattainable. But about that we do almost nothing. We really want to be leaders in this topic. I want to be a leader at the European level. When I speak to my European colleagues, I tell them we need to pick our regulatory battles in a smart way. We cannot regulate everything as Europe. But what it is that we really should be concerned about. We need to recognize that innovation and regulation don't always go hand in hand. But let's pick those battles that are important to us. And for me, there are two battles. The first is democracy and how technology is actually interfering with the democratic debate. And the second is the protection of our kids and our teenagers. These are the two battles I've decided to pick. And as far as I know, I was the only leader who spoke about this at the UN General Assembly last year. And I intend to speak again about it, because I think it is a global problem. And I think we also need to tell the technology companies in no uncertain look, you're making enough money. You don't need to make money from our children. You just don't. I mean, there's enough money to be made, in general. But they know it very well that they want to, when you look at that they want to capture those customers, because for them they're customers at a very early age, and hook them on, platforms out of which they will make money. And of course, we have not at all spoken, because right now the topic is children in the age of AI. We are still talking about, the digital platforms, which of course use a lot of AI. We have not yet at all spoken about what AI means for education. The great opportunities, but also the great challenges. Because look, at the end of the day, we need to understand that our brain has evolved over millions of years through our interaction with the physical world. So there are skills which we acquire as we grow up, which are, necessary in order for us to become fully functioning, adult humans. And we're now throwing at our kids a completely different, sensory world. They live in two worlds. They live in a physical and a digital world. We have no idea how this is going to turn out. But how are you going to tell your kid, the temptation of using any large language model, any ChatGPT for doing your homework? It's as simple as that, huh? The temptation, it's too big. I mean, how are you going to resist that? I don't have an answer, but I know that we're asking our kids to do something which they simply cannot do. We can't resist it. We cannot resist it frequently. So if we can't resist it, if we recognize that we're addicted, I mean, how can we expect our kids to behave in a different world? They won't.
No. I mean, this brings us exactly to the next point of our discussion. Very much agree with you. You are one of the few political leaders in Europe who say with general bans it will not work. So then what is and you have been proposing, and this is what we're talking about, to tackle the problem at the roots. No matter how a child will go to a platform, and they will go, they have the right to go, and they have the curiosity and so on. What we're asking, and this is the laws that it is proposed, stop addicting them. Stop the addictive mechanisms. Everybody, the children, have the right to go if the content is appropriate for the child. The problem is stop the addictive mechanism which you apply for us. Don't do it for children. Do less, not do more. Am I right?
You are right. I would like to pick up on the point that the Prime Minister made about banning, because that's suddenly become a thing all over the world. Let's ban it. And I keep on asking, what are we banning? What are we banning? And someone rang me the other day and said, oh, have you seen all the pornography on Spotify? And I go, oh, no, not Spotify as well. The point is it goes around. I know children who have bullied each other on Amazon reviews. Yeah? I think we have to be clear that the technology is a tool and it can be used for good or bad, and it can be used in different ways. And I think that this point you're making about addiction and the point that the Prime Minister is making about how do we approach AI in this new world and not say don't use it, but how do you use it? How do you equip kids to use it? But ultimately, we've also got to take a big decision about whether technology companies are without rules, whether they have the immunity that they would like to have. Yeah? And ultimately, that is a question of money, and that is ultimately a question of power, and it will very, very rapidly be a question of sovereignty, values, morality, democracy, all the biggest issues that we have. But in the first instance, my answer to you is we have to say that certain design features and certain lack of attention to the needs of children is not acceptable in the commercial world. And that has two sort of lines of inquiry. One is the regulatory one, where we say, look, we don't like these outcomes. You're the clever guys. You work out how you're going to design your product, but it must not do A, B, C, D. And I do agree with you, Konstantinos, that the addiction piece is the most important. And I give you two examples. One is from an American university where there was a very interesting piece of research, and it said, how much would you pay to stay online? The answer was nothing. How much would you pay to get everybody else offline $50 a month? the kids were willing to pay to be off on condition everyone else was. So I think that that's something to hold in our mind, which is we say that we're giving them this product, but they're actually trying to pull away from it. But A, it's irresistible, as you've said, and B, everybody else is there. Human beings are social animals. Young people in particular have to find their society. The other thing I would say is this idea, and in fact in the UK it became the OED, the Oxford Dictionary word of the year, brain rot. And it's not simply about content. And I think that's where the politicians who have concentrated on parental controls, and I very much agree on the question of educating parents, involving parents, having parents in the sea of how we tackle this, but the idea that parental controls or bans is the answer to this is simply not right. We have to look upstream and we have to say, actually, it is not okay to addict as a commercial policy if we're talking under 18s. It's simply not, because a child, and many, many children say this, teenagers and tweens, you know, that sort of, 8 to 12-year-old particularly say this. It is the loss of their time, the opportunity cost, the waking up from the scroll and realizing 2 hours has gone by and you haven't done your homework, and you haven't been out to play, and you haven't had a meaningful conversation, and you haven't drawn something. It's all the haven'ts that they feel. And that is a stealing of childhood. That is a stealing of time and development that is simply catastrophic at different points in your life. And so I think that, and I very much like the strategy, the Greek strategy, in the emphasis on addiction, because it is this brain rot that is stealing childhood. And the parents alone cannot, make their way through this without regulatory help, without design help. And I think one of the pieces of work that Five Rights did last year was we looked at what had been successful in regulation, and we found that default settings was the most successful, default as in the ones that the companies defaulted to, not the ones the parents defaulted to. Information popping up here and there was virtually useless. More information, more you can do this, you can do this. If you do 10 different clicks, you can set your own boundaries. And the most useful things were the things that happen to children across schools, across communities, across nation states. So it was in the design that we found the power.
Excellent. You want to respond immediately to this, Mr.
Well, I agree with you that, at the end of the day, we cannot also put too much emphasis on what parents can do, because parents will be competing, will be fighting with their children, but it's part of the growing up project. Parents have to set boundaries, not just in the digital world, everywhere. So, to the parents who tell me, I don't really want to do this, well, I said, sorry, but it's part of the responsibility as a parent. But you're absolutely right that there's only that much that we can expect from parents to do, but we need them very, very actively engaged. At least they need to know what already exists, which they don't. In terms of the tools. But I think the default settings are incredibly important, because at the end of the day, what we want is to break the cycle of addiction. So we want to break the scrolling pattern. And this could happen through appropriate default settings. Let me just give you one personal example, which I found very, very interesting. When you go into for example, YouTube. YouTube knows what you like. Okay, so you go into YouTube, and they start serving you, the videos that, they know that, I don't know, I may be interested in cars or whatever. So I go in, and there are, the videos. Now, what happens if you turn off the history setting? You go into YouTube, and there's a blank page. Okay. I still need to type in what I want to see. I can tell you the usage is going to drop tremendously, because every single time you go into the application is not going to serve you the content that it knows will interest you. So the addictive pattern needs to be broken at the beginning, or it needs to be broken during the time of scrolling. Stop. You've done a minute. You've seen 3 things. I block you. There's no, you're done for the day. Get out. I don't know. Come back tomorrow. But all this is premised upon the design of the product. There's only that much you can do as a parent to put restrictions. So I absolutely agree with you. We need to recognize what the problem is. We have 2, I think, types of problems. The first is the addiction itself and the time we spend. And there, of course, time is finite. And we need to ensure that we also offer our kids, other opportunities. So, for example, for me, the best thing we can do for our kids and our teenagers is sports. Because inevitably, if you do sports, you won't be on your phone. So building infrastructure and focusing on sports at a younger age is probably the best thing we can do. And then there is a content, because not all technology is bad. So how do we reward creative technological engagement? Doing, for example, a puzzle of a painting, which we so how do we encourage that interaction with technology, which we know is useful, while essentially punishing what we know is detrimental? And I think you're right. A lot of that will depend on the companies themselves design their default settings in a way that will break this addiction cycle. And of course, there will always be illegal content, problematic problematic content. What you mentioned, about pornography and about more violent behavior. It is also a question of moderation at the end of the day. And the more the companies withdraw from this domain, as if they don't care, as if they're just platforms that are not responsible for the content, which was the root cause of the way the U.S. regulatory approach looked at them, that you're not curators. Yeah. You are just platforms. I mean, everyone. And of course, the extreme arguments behind freedom of speech are pushing us, unfortunately, in the opposite direction.
Yeah. I mean, I think you made the fundamental point a little while ago. You said, don't make money on the back of our kids. So actually, if the engagement is a little less, that's an excellent thing. It gives a little bit more choice, a little bit more agency to the kids, and it gives them more opportunity to break that cycle of being on all the time. Mm. I do want to just pick up on 2 things. One is, about age verification. The whole offer of this technological world is that it's personalized. They know how tall you are from your gait. They know.
They know everything about us.
Yeah. It is a fake problem.
It is a fake problem. It is a fake problem. There are also a lot of the sort of, the sort of creating the state as the monster. Another false problem when so many countries, we don't have in ID cards in the UK, but we have a lot of neutral places like your NHS number, your doctor's number, your school number that actually says roughly how old you are. There are so many ways, both that they know and that we could know, that are neutral and not difficult. So I think that's another false god. And then finally, I think, when you're talking about sports and Jonathan Haidt's book, I do think a lot of people picked up John's book and went, let's ban it for kids. And they didn't read the bit, and it was an excellent part of this book, The Anxious Generation, that was about play.
Well, unsupervised play, in particular.
Exactly. It's about play. It's about drama. It's about going to the shop on your own. It's about being in the world and feeling your agency as a young person. And I do think that we do have to consider, what have we taken away from children and what gap have we left to be filled with technology? And there is nowhere we can see it more sort of acutely right now as what I consider a sort of a new emergency, as if we needed another one, which is in early years. So now you used to go to nursery school and you have these little kids and they're doing story time and they're singing songs and they're in a circle and one knows this piece of the song and one knows the other piece of the song. So they sit in front of YouTube and watch it like this, you know, in a direct, as a consumer. And that sort of, you know, the amount of time and the loss of seeing things from from different perspectives is, I think, a time bomb that will be equivalent to the COVID time bomb of how children developed. Because, you know, if you're always developing from something maybe better sung, maybe more beautifully illustrated, but you are not engaged in your life, you are missing some of the building blocks of what it is to be adult, what it is to grow, what it is to come into maturity with all the problems that you have. And maybe finally, there will always be predators, there will always be some bad content, there will always be things in the world, and we must not let better be the enemy of best. We can make this quite simply better for 80% of the kids, 80% of the time, and then we have to deal with the rest. And that is a different issue. And I think that in the pushback, in the narrative against what you're saying about what Greece is trying to do, what I've been doing for the last 13 years, in that narrative it is what if, what but, and it's always the edge case. And I do not think you can make law for the edge case. You cannot make regulation for everyone. But what I think we do is we raise the floor. That gives parents a chance to parent, and they do have to parent, and they do have to set boundaries. And it means those children who do not have parental care in the way that we would wish, there is a floor. That is what I'm asking. There is no ceiling, and this, you know, the products could be magnificent, and I'm actually a tech user, and I love it, and I use it very often in creative environments with young people to show them that they can do different things with it. But we have to have a floor, and that floor has to be based on you do not addict a child. You do not send them things that they did not choose. You do not make money on their back. You give them agency and you respect their rights, their right to participate, but their right to participate and be protected by the adult world.
Excellent. Mr. President, would you like to conclude?
I could.
Then I would like to conclude.
I couldn't agree more.
I would like to conclude by thanking you, asking for forgiveness to the organizers. I think we went over time, but I would like to spend 30 seconds for thanking the group of people that delivered to your promise, Mr. Prime Minister, and sent really a fantastic feedback to the European Commission about the regulatory framework that they are preparing, and Greece, in my opinion, has sent the most profound, comprehensive, and detailed contribution. And these are the heroes, and they are here today, and I personally thank you for this. And we all thank you.
Thank you.
We should stay in touch.
Yes, I'll give you my card.